Excuse me, can I interrupt?
I have
There are
another.
photos that are being released of the secretary as she is testifying from inside this room. Can you please advise me as to whether or not that's permissible and consistent with the rules, particularly given that we have asked for a public hearing? If there are photos that are being released of the secretary as she is testifying, can you please explain how that
I'm
can
done
occur?
with this. If you guys are doing that, I am done. You can hold me in contempt from now until the cows come home. This is just typical behavior.
We will go off the record.
Oh, for heaven's
So I would like
sake.
to understand how that's permissible.
Before the hearing was,
It doesn't
Excuse
matter.
me.
We all are abiding by the same rules.
I will take that down.
Yeah,
I
well,
would like to take a break at this moment.
yeah,
and I'd like to have
I'm
a
done
conversation.
for now.
Go off the record. Go off the record.
Mr. Chairman, ranking member, members of the committee, as a former United States Senator, I have respect for legislative oversight, and I expect its exercise, as do the American people, to be principled and fearless in pursuit of truth and accountability. As we all know, however, too often congressional investigations are partisan political theater, which is an abdication of duty and an insult to the American people. This committee justified its subpoena to me based on its assumption that I have information regarding the investigations into the criminal activities of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Let me be as clear as I can. I do not. As I stated in my sworn declaration on January 13th, I had no idea about their criminal activities. I do not recall ever encountering Mr. Epstein. I never flew on his plane or visited his island, homes, or offices. I have nothing to add to that. Like every decent person, I've been horrified by what we have learned about their crimes. It's unfathomable that Mr. Epstein initially got a slap on the wrist in 2008, which allowed him to continue his predatory practices for another decade. Mr. Chairman, your investigation is supposed to be assessing the federal government's handling of the investigations and prosecutions of Epstein and his crimes. You subpoenaed 8 law enforcement officials, all of whom ran the Department of Justice or directed the FBI when Epstein's crimes were investigated and prosecuted. Of those 8, only 1 appeared before the committee. 5 of the 6 former attorneys general were allowed to submit brief statements stating they had no information to provide. You have held 0 public hearings, refused to allow the media to attend them, including today, despite espousing the need for transparency on dozens of occasions. You have made little effort to call the people who show up most prominently in the Epstein files. And when you did, not a single Republican member showed up for Les Wexner's deposition. This institutional failure is designed to protect one political party and one public official, rather than to seek truth and justice for the victims and survivors, as well as inform the public who want to get to the bottom of this matter. My heart breaks for the survivors, and I am furious on their behalf. I have spent my life advocating for women and girls. I have worked hard to stop the terrible abuses so many women and girls face here and around the world, including human trafficking, forced labor, domestic violence, and sexual slavery. For too long, these have been largely invisible crimes or not treated as crimes at all. But the survivors are real and they are entitled to justice. In Southeast Asia, I met girls as young as 12 years old who had been forced into prostitution and raped repeatedly. Some were dying of AIDS. In Eastern Europe, I met mothers who told me how they lost their daughters to trafficking and did not know where to turn. In settings around the world, I met survivors trying to rebuild their lives and help rescue others with little support from people in power who too often turned a blind eye and a cold shoulder. If you are new to this issue, let me tell you, Jeffrey Epstein was a heinous individual, but he's far from alone. This is not a one-off tabloid sensation or political scandal. It is a global scourge with an unimaginable human toll. My work combating sex trafficking goes back to my days as First Lady. I worked to pass the first federal legislation against trafficking and was proud that my husband signed the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which increased support for survivors and gave prosecutors better tools for going after traffickers. As Secretary of State, I appointed a former federal prosecutor, Lucy DeBaca, to ramp up our global anti-trafficking efforts. I oversaw nearly 170 anti-trafficking programs in 70 nations and directly pressed foreign leaders to crack down on trafficking networks in their countries. Every year, we published a global report to shine a light on abuses. The findings of those reports triggered sanctions on countries failing to make progress, so they became a powerful diplomatic tool to drive concrete action. I insisted that the United States be included in the report for the first time ever in 2011, because we must hold ourselves not just to the same standard as the rest of the world, but to an even higher one. Sex trafficking and modern slavery should have no place in America. None. Infuriatingly, the Trump administration gutted the Trafficking in Persons Office at the State Department, cutting more than 70% of the career civil and foreign service experts who worked so hard to prevent trafficking crimes. The annual trafficking report required by law was delayed for months. The message from the Trump administration to the American people and the world could not be clearer. Combating human trafficking is no longer an American priority under the Trump White House. That's a tragedy, it's a scandal, and it deserves vigorous investigation and oversight. A committee endeavoring to stopping human trafficking would seek to understand what specific steps are needed to fix a legal system that allowed Epstein to get away with his crimes. A committee run by elected officials with a commitment to transparency would ensure the full release of all the files. It would ensure that the lawful redactions of those files protected the victims and survivors, not powerful men and political allies. It would get to the bottom of reports that DOJ withheld FBI interviews in which a survivor accuses President Trump of crimes. It would subpoena anyone who asked on which night there would be the wildest party on Epstein's island. It would demand testimony from prosecutors from Florida, New York, and the Department of Justice about why they gave Epstein a sweetheart deal and chose not to pursue others who may have been implicated in his crimes. And it would demand that Secretary Rubio and Attorney General Bondi testify about why this administration is abandoning survivors and playing into the hands of traffickers. It would seek out advocates and law enforcement officials on the front lines of the fight against human trafficking and ask them what support they need. And it would put forth legislation to provide more resources and force this administration to act. But that's not happening. Instead, you have compelled me to testify, fully aware that I have no knowledge that would assist your investigation, in order to distract from President Trump's actions and to cover them up despite legitimate calls for answers. If this committee is serious about learning the truth about Epstein's trafficking crimes, it would not rely on press gaggles to get answers from our current president on his involvement. It would ask him directly under oath about the tens of thousands of times he shows up in the Epstein files. If the majority was serious, it would not waste time on fishing expeditions. There is too much to be done. What is being held back? Who is being protected? And why the cover-up? So my challenge to you, Mr. Chairman, and members of this committee is the same challenge I put to myself throughout my long service to this nation. How to be worthy of the trust of the American people that they have given to you. They expect statesmanship, not gamesmanship, leading, not grandstanding. And they expect you to use your power to get to the truth and to do more to help survivors of Epstein's crimes, as well as the millions more who are victims of sex trafficking in this country and around the world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would also like to request that the video of this deposition be made available within 24 hours, as it has been for other witnesses.
And finally, do you think that Donald Trump should be deposed by this committee?
Absolutely. You know, I was a lawyer, and as a lawyer, you would look for pattern and practice. If you were deposing a witness in a case that you were trying, if you were in court, what did you know about this person? What you knew could influence how you questioned that person, how you tried the case. Donald Trump has been held civilly liable for sexual assault by a jury of his peers. 9 members of a jury found him liable in the sexual assault of E. Jean Carroll. That is behavior. That fits a pattern if one were looking for a pattern. He has also been convicted on 34 felony counts for attempting to hide his relationship with an escort and then to commit business fraud to prevent it from becoming public in the 2016 campaign, which was ultimately election interference. So if I were running the committee or I were involved in this investigation, I would be looking for people who maybe had some prior conduct that might be relevant to either money or crimes. And yes, I think that it would be in keeping with the scope of the investigation of this committee to set up a deposition with President Trump. I know he's been deposed many, many, many times. He's taken the Fifth Amendment many, many hundreds of times, so I'm not saying you're going to get a lot of information. But given what's in the files and given past and prior conduct, he would be on my witness list.
And just to make clear for the record, have you ever met Jeffrey Epstein?
I do not recall ever meeting Jeffrey Epstein. In preparation for this hearing, I was told that he attended an event at the White House that was put on by the White House Historical Association. But I have no recollection of that.
And only that one time at the White House Historical Association?
That's the only time that I'm aware of that I might have possibly been in the same room with him.
Did you have an initial impression of Mr. Epstein?
I have no recollection of Mr. Epstein. I'm just told that he was in a room at a dinner that we were hosting for the White House Historical Association.
What was your understanding of what Mr. Epstein did for work?
I knew nothing about him. He was there as an invited guest by the White House Historical Association. That's my best recollection.
And no one else informed you of what Mr. Epstein did for work?
No, but we had hundreds and thousands of people who came to the White House. I was not informed of what people did or didn't do for work, especially someone that I never even had a conversation with.
Do you know who invited Mr. Epstein to the White House?
I can only tell you what I know, which is that he apparently was a guest invited by the White House Historical Association to attend a dinner to thank people who gave money to the White House Historical Association for the upkeep and maintenance of the White House. That's what I was informed of in preparation for coming here.
Have you reviewed any 2025-2026 Epstein files that were released that you believe reference or relate to those specific 2016 claims regarding the Podesta emails, Comet Ping Pong Pizza used as code possibly?
I'm sorry, does
You're
this
asking
relate?
her about whether
Excuse me.
she's reviewed emails in the
In the
Epstein
Epstein files.
files was related to the wacky Pizzagate
You
scandal.
could characterize it however you want. I just would like to know if she's familiar with any of them.
So
She's
excuse me,
commenting.
your question is about whether or not she has reviewed any emails in the Epstein release files about Pizzagate.
Correct.
Pizzagate was totally made up. It was an outrageous allegation that ended up hurting a number of people, that caused a deranged young man to show up with his assault rifle and shoot up a local pizzeria. I can't believe you're even referencing it. You should be.
There are connections to the language. I'm
Well,
not
the
talking
QAnon
about-
people believe there are, so
I don't know what QAnon
have at
people
it.
believe.
Have at it.
But you've accused certain parties, and I think even right now today, of promoting slow walking or information in ways that fuels conspiracies. In your view, did any Epstein-Maxwell related investigations or file handling pre or post 2019 contribute to or intersect with the spread of Pizzagate style theories about Democrat figures?
Objection.
I have
Calls
no
for
way of answering. That is the
possible
most
speculation.
ridiculously.
Have you or your representatives identified any Epstein file content that has been misinterpreted online to revive those claims? And what steps, if any, have you taken to clarify?
Again, object on the ground of
I think that this is all very
Speculation.
reasonable.
Well, first of all, I don't follow the crazy conspiracy stories that are online. I regret that anybody does. I find it quite sad, but also disturbing that people would believe some of what is put forth, like Pizzagate. So I have taken no steps to review anything
Do you think
that might
pizza-
have any connection to something which I think is totally bogus.
Subscribe to One India and never miss an update. Download the One India app now.